Hello, Mudassir. How are you?
Hey, Sai, I'm good. How about you?
I am well. It's good to be with you. It's good to be with our audience, those that are here with us live, and likewise those that may be listening to the recording. Before we dive into our topic and our wonderful guest today, would love to have you, Mudassir, just briefly introduce yourself, and I'll do the same before we dive in.
Certainly. Likewise, it's good to be back and resume our series here. So, hello everyone. As you all already know me, I'm Mudassir. I'm a coach, consultant, and agile practitioner with the focus on enhancing teams' performance using agile methodologies and practices to deliver business outcomes. I partner with leaders, middle managers, and across the teams to have to engage them and make them to work at optimal level. And essentially, that's what I do. Uh, Other than that, pretty much I'm open for the discussion. Sai, a brief introduction from your side, and let's dive in.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much, Mudassir. Likewise, I'm a business coach and consultant, and I really focus on transformation and change. Love to partner with organizations to really help them calibrate their business models and operating models for maximizing their impact in the world. So, broad and deep background. As I like to say, I've been doing this far too long. However, I have had the pleasure of meeting people like our tremendous guests today. So, definitively, the benefits are there. So, Mudassir, if you're good, I'm gonna do a little bit of introduction before we invite Todd into the conversation. Sound reasonable?
Yeah, most certainly. Please go ahead.
Excellent, excellent. So, so I met Todd many moons ago, and we've shared many drinks at Starbucks, and absolutely fell in love with the man. A brilliant soul. I got to be very, very frank about it. And I want to give a little bit of background, and I want to tell you what grabbed me about him. So, very, very specifically. So Todd has tremendous experience, if you will, as a strategist with a human-centered approach, as he classifies himself. Digital strategy, community strategist. He's a connector, as he talks about. And likewise, he really focuses on nurturing genuine connection in online communities and digital workplaces. So a lot of talent that is very, very immediately applicable to every organization and where we find ourselves in our evolution as the human race and all the technologies we leverage. A little bit more about him, if you will, because I'm completely captivated by this fine individual. As he likes to say, he's more than a strategist. He likes to elevate people and really encourage them, enable them to make informed career choices as such. So really respecting them in that way and really fostering a sense of belonging within their communities. So the human dimension is very evident in all the wonderful things that Todd brings to the table. Again, a strategist with a human-centered approach is a very rare, I'll say, individual to find. When I met Todd, now kind of going back a number of years ago, a significant number of years ago, when I met Todd, I was immediately struck by the combination of talent and humanity. And to be very frank about it, those two pillars are not always present in the same individual, let alone with the immediacy that it hit me when I first met him. So by all means, I don't want to keep going because I will keep going about this fine gentleman. I want to welcome Todd into the conversation. Welcome, 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 my dear friend.
Sai, thank you so much. Mudassir, thank you so much for the kind words. I don't know if any human alive could live up to the warm introduction you made for me, but I appreciate the spirit and intent in which it was meant. As you said, you and I have been friends and colleagues for a long time, many years now, and we've gone through some long journeys together. And Mudassir, you're a new friend, so I'm looking forward to getting to know you better through this. But yes, I mean, I think you're absolutely spot on with what I've tried to be, what I've aspired to. Whether I achieve the reality of that in all cases is, of course, up to the situation. But thanks so much for having me on the show.
A pleasure to have you. An absolute pleasure. So dig a little bit deeper on, I kind of touched, who is Todd? Help us understand, bring us into your world.
I'm just a guy, the I suppose that I ended up in this space, the world of community building, particularly using digital spaces for intermediation between people, accidentally. I think community management, community building, online communities is I'll call it a talent category or a profession that has emerged over the past 20 years as we've kind of grown up through the internet. It's been around much longer. It goes back to the 80s or even the 70s. If you include things like email lists, listservs, chat rooms, any place where it's many to many communication rather than one to many communication, you could classify these as online community spaces. I've had a long-standing interest in those kinds of spaces, really kind of coming at it as a hobbyist gamer, and then applying those learnings to corporate environments and understanding how people come together due to shared interests, shared need to build trust with each other in spaces, especially when they can't necessarily connect with each other in person. And as we all are, we're across the miles. You're in one state, I'm in another. Mudassir, I'm not sure where in the world are you situated?
It's Bangalore, India.
You're in Bangalore, so good evening to you. And Sai and I are a lot closer in time zones. I think perhaps we're maybe an hour off each other at most. But as far as who I am, I would say at my core, and I've been working with a friend through this just for some personal marketing purposes. I am at my core a creative. I consider myself a creative person and a bit of a jester. I like play, and I think that I've approached work with that sense of play because I think that's where you start to put together things that maybe don't seem to go together in the first place, and see what happens when you do it. That sense of experiment, that sense of play is essential to community building because I think it creates curiosity and interest in others. So if anything has helped me to be successful, I think as a person or as a professional, it's been that sense of creativity and play.
Wonderful, wonderful. Todd, one thing that caught my attention is that your quote, "You can't call yourself a strategist if you haven't gotten your hands dirty doing a little bit of everything." So share more about it from the area that you have been explaining in past few minutes and the work that you have been doing.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Yeah, it's a quote I've had up on my website for a number of years now, and I've kept it there because it's continued to resonate with people, and I can probably point to one business around that because they've appreciated that mindset. I don't have a lot of I don't put a lot of credence into people who claim that they're strategists and have never actually done the work. And so that's something then that I've always tried to do, even if I was managing a team, that, not necessarily that I know how to be a software developer because I don't, but I've worked with that individual closely enough that I can relate and understand what the issues happen to be, and that I know enough to be dangerous about a topic in some cases. But usually, if it's something in terms of community building or writing or creating, even if I've done it in a very ham-fisted way, I need to know how to do those tasks in order to be effective at it. I need to have encountered the reality of trying and failing, and taking lessons out of that, because I don't think you can be an effective strategist if you haven't tried your hand at a lot of different things. And so I know that there are many people who will say conventional wisdom is to go deep in an expertise, but I'm always a little suspicious of pure specialists because they lack the breadth of vision to be able to see things in context with each other. And so I'm suspicious of those who either have gone too deep or who are not actively practicing, not continuing to try to stay sharp, doing day-to-day tasks. And I think that translates into a suspicion of executive leadership that has forgotten how to do things. And maybe they did at one time the lifting, but they stopped or maybe never have appreciated the work that's involved, and it's divorced them from a realistic assessment of the work that has to be done. I have a friend of mine, Eric Johnson, who works for a company called Aurora WDC. They're a competitive research company. He calls it, and I don't know the roots of this, but he calls it a stochasm, STOCHASM, that he defines as the difference between what an executive believes and what reality actually is.
Well said.
So, with that said, Todd, you had described pure specialists. You talked about what strategists in your words and then from the place where you are coming from, and they are so-called strategists. And with all this combined, and in any environment, we'll find all these folks together, most likely. Having said that, please tell us more about the relationship between the community and how does these players come into play, and how do true strategists drive this forward?
Yeah. So particularly in the world of building online communities for, let's say, for a mid-sized to large enterprise or organization, a lot of times community comes up as a point solution. It's thought of as a point solution for customer support. Oh, look, we're going to have a discussion forum, or we're going to have a private social media space for our customers to come and ask us questions and get answers to their whatever issues they may be having with our software or our service. And it's a place where we can maybe deflect some of the tickets that are hitting our technical support team. And so the ROI for that tends to be calculated in very stark terms around how many tickets have been deflected, how much money has that actually saved, which I think is very appealing to left brain thinking, from leadership teams about like a justification to have it. Thing is it ever going to be enough money that it's saving to justify it in the minds of the leadership team? But I think where they'll think about that as a community, that's a support function. But is that truly a community? And where these things have done their best with you think of organizations like Lego or Sephora or SAP, they've managed to create an online space for people to interact where they feel enough of a level of trust in the brand and enough of a level of trust in others within that space, because they believe they have similar interests, they have similar goals with what they're trying to achieve, that's where community begins to come in. I was having a conversation earlier this morning with a colleague from the community space by the name of Jay Washington. She works for Headspace and has her own consultancy around community building. And it came up in our conversation that the essence of community building is having a viable container for it that is either in physical space. You've got a fit for use architectural space, or in a digital space, you've got a usable forum, a usable Slack channel, a place where people can come together. You've got you've got safety and trust, in that if I come here, I don't feel like I'm being abused with what I'm doing, and that there's a level of accountability there and buy-in there, that you've got a leadership team that gets what you're doing, and that they are accountable for making sure that that space remains viable and remains, you know, a good place to be. And so, as you can probably infer from that, there are a number of parties required to make this work. You certainly need a leadership team and people from your organization that are bought into the idea of it being an effective community space, that they recognize it's more than just the mechanistic or fiscal benefit of deflecting trouble tickets or coming up with new ideas for products or services. It's got something to do with enabling people who, to some degree or other, identify themselves with your product or service and what you're doing. So it requires that leadership piece. It also requires people who are going to manage the day-to-day of that space. Just like you wouldn't manage an office building without people who are, you know, in charge of security and are cleaning it up, and are maybe even concierges who kind of walk people in and make them feel welcome in the space. You need the equivalent of that in whatever online community space you have. You need community managers who are not simply administrators or police officers for that space, but who are welcomers, who are enthusiastic, warm, and knowledgeable about other people in the space. They are evangelists, if you will, around the cause. And then, of course, you need the people to come in and use that space. And the complexities of having all those audiences, you know, and getting them aligned, you know, means that it can become a terrifying prospect for organizations to try to set up and run something like this. And that's where they would need somebody like me as a strategist to come in and help them lay the groundwork for not a guarantee of success, because there are no guarantees, but to help them quickly move forward and set the conditions for success in what they're doing. All right, really long-winded answer to your question.
No. It is helpful.
I love where you've taken us, Todd. Thank you, Mudassir. I love where you've taken us, because you've identified a few things. I want to kind of put them out there and see what your thoughts are. One is a lot of organizations, when they approach communities, it's almost like you said, taking kind of a function and providing a community aspect to it, almost in the intent of humanizing it for one purpose or another. So that's one thought that ran through my mind. And then the other one is the relationship between brand, between community, the whole leveraging of technologies and the container aspect, what I'll say ages ago used to call an identity brand, like Starbucks. So those things all strike me as you express them. I love your thoughts and what have you in relative to those, Todd.
Yeah, no, that's great. I am a big believer in using community spaces, whether in person or digital, or my favorite, a hybrid between the two, because I think it's a powerful combination to have that, to humanize a brand, to humanize connection between people. I think we've just gone through a period, having come out of the pandemic situation and move beyond that. Now, over the last year or two, I think tech overall and the community management space has not been immune from this. Has gone through like some serious downsizing and jettisoning of talent from organizations, something which I think is very short-sighted and thoughtless for organizations that are just reacting to very short-term needs in what they have. I think that losing community managers from your brand is akin to cutting off a limb. from your body. If you think about, would you get rid of somebody from the front desk, in your office building? Do you want to take your customer service leaders, your people who are your success managers for an organization? You just want to get rid of them as well. It's even worse with the community, because it's not just the one-to-one experiences that people have when they're in those roles. As a community manager, you're extremely visible to a broad audience of people, everybody who's in that online community space with you. And so I think a fatal assumption a lot of organizations will make that dehumanizes the brand is they get rid of somebody that is a face of the organization, the face of the brand and what they do. And I think the long-term implications of that is still to be felt, but they will be felt by organizations that, people leave, come and leave jobs all the time. And of course, community managers change jobs and move to new places. But I think it is particularly damaging or calamitous to a brand to be pulling somebody who is a highly visible evangelist, out of that space. So the humanization of a brand, is directly dependent upon, the people that are meeting face to face with your customers. So there's a strong connection between brand and community.
Todd, there's an interesting, and I'll kind of reference sort of, as I look at reality, I've always said reality is a collection of tensions that we work with, and there's a tension that is there that I'm sensing. I'm going to put words to it and kind of please elaborate or refine it, if you will. But if we just leverage technology can actually sterilize the human experience if left its own vice, whatever that might be. Communities humanize technology so that you get this blended from both dimensions. That's a game changer, quite honestly.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But it is, and a certain Rush song was running through my head in the background. There's a lyric that always kind of plays when I hear that theme. I think it's the spirit of music. All this machinery making modern music can still be open-hearted. And for me, that's like a central goal of what we're trying to do. We have technologies that enable us to connect across the miles. Now, it used to be just text. Now it's video. The three of us are in this common space now together. We can even read body language. We can hear tone of voice. It's inches away from being as effective as being in the same room with each other. There's still an inescapable essence and value to being, together in person, of course. But technology is getting better and better at bridging that gap and having heart and weight and emotional resonance to it. And some very moving things can happen in this space. But you're right. I mean, the technological containers that we use matter so much. Even in the selection of the right community platform, which many organizations will worry about. It's the thing that would drive the thing that is, as a strategist, that would drive me screaming from the room in conversations with a customer would be as if they say, well, we just want the cheapest possible out of the box solution for a community. Why are you going to create conversations that are going to be impact? They can be so impactful for you if you make a thoughtful choice about what's going to be the right fit for the group of stakeholders, customers, employees, other stakeholders that you want to empower in that space. Because the way they interact is going to be very, very different in a discussion forum versus something that feels like a Twitter feed versus something that looks like a Slack channel. The immediacy, the urgency, the asynchronicity of interactions in those technology containers, the ability to share information differently within those spaces, the rediscoverability of that information through search is very different between those different technologies. And if you haven't done the homework of actually talking to your customers or thinking deeply, empathizing deeply with what they need to solve their daily challenges with regard to your product or brand, the things that you're doing, um, that that platform is going to fall flat. And by way of example, there was a professional organization local to me in the Wisconsin market that was about entrepreneurship, growing entrepreneurs in the region. At one point, they asked, they decided that they were going to create a Slack instance for their members. Well, this was before Slack really got a bunch of adoption. I was a regular user of it. It has wonderful use cases in certain situations, but this definitely wasn't one of them because the members were of an age demographic where they and a psychological disposition where they were stressed out by the idea of like this continuous feed of chat that went by, and so the adoption was effectively zero. And a lot of communities can die at their launch because you built the wrong sort of building for everybody to live in. You built a convenience mart instead of a church hall, for people to come together, and or worse yet, you've decided to build your community in the middle of a casino instead of someplace that's not going to have as many distractions around it. So a lot of people will say, well, it's just easier for us to create our community inside of a Facebook group or a LinkedIn group. And those places are full of distractions. Like they may be, lovely, available experiences and ways to quickly build a group of people within that space. But the interests of those large social media platforms is not in helping you build your community. It's in keeping people within the platform. And so that bifurcation of interests is not going to serve in your attempt to build a community, even though free might seem really fun and attractive to do.
Well said. So Todd, I want to ask you a kind of a quick follow-on question, and Mudassir, I'll turn it back to you after I ask my question and let Todd respond, if you will. So I've been involved in communities and organizations, I'll say pre the massive technology wave that we have now. So really honing in on the human element as a mechanism. The interesting thing that seems to be happening, and I really want your commentary and thoughts on this, is the technology seems to be forming the context more and more in which the content are us, the human beings, in the formation of communities. That balance or imbalance potentially of the non-tech versus tech and how much it defines the context is a very delicate balance, to say the least.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that the medium is impacting the message.
So if we don't have people like you who kind of keep us honest, for lack of better words, it can go in a multitude of skews.
Absolutely. So this is something that comes into play in a couple of interesting ways. So one of which is this has happened frequently when I've worked with large enterprise brands that maybe have multi-product solutions for their customers. They want to structure their online community experiences. They want to build the whole town rather than setting up an outpost that's going to grow over time, because they see this other brand over here that has a very built out infrastructure or information architecture of a different discussion forum for every one of their products and different special interest groups for 5 or 10 different things, and they think they have to emulate that immediately. What they didn't see was early on what made that community successful was that they didn't try to build everything at once. So I'm a big believer in emergent design for that reason, and the organicism of community growth has got to be not immediately building the whole town, because you'll end up with a ghost town.
Yeah.
And so that's one way that structure and the way that, like, if you try to straitjacket people into using the right form for the right thing, you're creating anxiety that's going to prevent them from participating in the first place. The other piece of that now is, I think that technology, if we start thinking about more modern applications of tech, now we're seeing the introduction of AI-based generative models, LLMs, for their use in community spaces. They have some potentially wonderful uses for summarizing discussions, for helping us to get quickly up to speed, to even formulate a reply on a difficult subject, to help you kind of iterate to something that you feel is going to better express what you do. But there's a great danger in, obviously, things like the hallucination of results, and of ethical issues of using the technology without actually disclosing that you're using the technology in the space. And so the technology is now not even, it's not even that it's that it's influencing us because of the structure of the building, but now there's a robot in the building with us that is trying to be our helpful translator, that isn't always doing a great job of it. That is going to be very interesting too.
Thanks, Todd. And then seems like both Sai and Todd, you are reading my mind, and I was also thinking in the same direction. With the uprise of AI and technologies around communities and in communication channels, having said that, and you also mentioned about hallucination of results, distraction, and bifurcation of interest in online communities, and then you also briefly touched on emerging design. You are a fan of emerging design. So with all this put into a equation, the question that gets to my head is, how does a community strategist need to adapt in such situations or circumstances to have an impact on an organization or a situation?
It's a great question. I think because we're as the people that work in my professional space, who work as consultants, there are maybe about, I don't know, 200 or so of us worldwide that do this work. We're often airdropped into situations where we need to quickly assess the culture, but we've been dropped into what they perceive as a tactical need. How do we build a great online community? Well, implicit in that question is community. How do we build more of a community? Well, chances are you probably already have some kind of nascent community group that you're involved with. The problem becomes, the challenge as a strategist for me becomes, how do I assess the mindset of the team that brought me in to do this work? It is at its heart deeply involved with cultural transformation and the way the organization is set up. And so assessing that understanding, asking questions, challenging assumptions is something that I regularly have to do. And really the entry to that tends to be leadership organizations who at least have an open-minded enough mindset, helping them by answering some of their basic questions about, like, well, what can we expect of a community? How can we expect it to grow over time? How soon are we going to get to some kind of results? How much can we grow? What is the upside, for this? And so entering into those conversations that, with something they are interested about, and being able to then introduce other topics or other potential benefits that they hadn't considered, is something that I have to do to excite and energize them about where they could go. And so I think to a large extent, the work that you and Sai do with organizational transformation, I may be coming at it from a little bit more of a roundabout way, but it's absolutely something that I address on a regular basis with leaders and people that want to see, that think they want to see a community implemented, but haven't necessarily thought through all the benefits, but also, what the journey is going to look like to get to what I think they want as a result.
Yeah, I can see that it is many ways overlapping with what we do, and I can correlate that. Yeah, thanks, Todd. Sai, do you have any questions or comments? Please chime in.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. I love the expansiveness of the conversation, quite honestly, and the hallucination of results. Just indeed, we all have our own hallucinations, let alone our mixed hallucinations. So I love that phrase. Todd, I would love for you to kind of guide us a little bit, if you will. If an organization brings you in and says, "Hey, help us understand the possibilities," and what they'll put out there is they'll say, "We understand, yes," and again, to quote you in some of the work that you've done, digital strategy being a blueprint for achieving organizational goals. For example, the online communities and the potential of deepening trust, customer loyalty, etc., and also the digital workplace having the potential to improve employee retention. Help us understand the journey, Todd, and the possibilities, just very broadly. We'd love for you to share with us.
Have you got about an hour here? So I think you've touched on a number of really interesting points. So I'll say first of all, a lot of the desired results for organizations with community building tend to be built around saving money, driving sales. How do we acquire and keep new customers, and then driving loyalty, and then beyond loyalty, beyond retention, driving advocacy within the space. So there's a scale here. Help customers solve their immediate pain point, their problem. Help them help the organization sell a little bit more product or service with what they're doing. Keep those customers in the long haul, and then the fourth piece, turn those customers into advocates or ambassadors for the brand over time. And communities can very powerfully do that. I think where they're often misperceived is that they're sort of lumped in with the big marketing mix. A friend of mine, Adrian Spire, and I have talked about this a lot. Adrian Spire wrote a book called The Accidental Community Manager, which is a wonderful read. If you get a chance to, I'll happily give him a plug. It's a great book. But building over time. Boy, I forgot where I was going to go with this.
Guide us relative to the journey, and we're open to the possibilities, exactly as someone might invite you in, Todd.
Yeah. So anyways, helping them to understand that building loyalty over time, but those are some of the end games that they're looking for. Starting out that conversation, though, sitting down with a customer and talking to them about what they want community to be, and if they can even be successful with it, I end up talking about how immediate it is to the identity of the people they're trying to reach. Because a lot of times they'll think about these groups as if they were like an audience to be played to. There are a lot of organizations I've gone into where they've said, well, yeah, can you add our Twitter feed in there? Or we need to make sure that we can get news announcements out to our employees or to our customers. But that's one to many. That's broadcast. That's not community. That's not the interaction of people. And so helping them understand that whatever solution they build, whatever community they try to create, we need to begin with a conversation about how's it going to impact how does what you do impact the identity of the way that the people you're trying to reach think about themselves. And so I'll often put it in terms of, and you've probably heard me use this before, Sai, so I'll ask for your forgiveness about it. I'll talk about a woolly mammoth factor. If we think about the early days of civilization, when people started coming together in larger than just family units, when they start to form early villages, their reason for coming together was often for survival, and particularly because some threat came into their immediate geographical vicinity. A big woolly mammoth comes into the area. It's trampling our crops. It's killing people. And if you've ever seen a woolly mammoth, it is a tremendously, like, of course you haven't seen a woolly mammoth, but if you've ever seen a skeleton of a woolly mammoth, or if you've been to the La Brea Tar Pits Museum, you can literally walk underneath the belly without crouching to get under one of these massive, frightening creatures. And so that the idea of you've got this existential threat that is threatening your life if you don't do something about it, this brings people together, and they form a hunting party and they kill the woolly mammoth, and then they discover, wow, not only did we kill this, but we now have its meat and we have its skin and we've got its tusks, and we can make things about we can make things to help our tribal groups survive over time as a result of it. And so over time, that town may become identified with this cult of the woolly mammoth, and it becomes sort of that gathering place. It's a rallying cry for people that feel that sense of belonging to that space. They've identified with the action, with being a part of who they are as a group. Well, we're not living under woolly mammoth world anymore, hopefully, for the most part. There are some communities that are existential in nature, like if someone's facing a life-threatening illness and they want to join an online community to get support for each other. But a lot of times for brands, if I'm selling enterprise accounting software, how does that impact my identity? How is that really relevant to me? And so getting leadership teams to recognize that the speed at which their attempt to establish a sense of community, the speed at which that's going to occur, has everything to do with how central you can make it about the identity of the people that you're trying to reach. And so that, for me, more so than the use cases, like those use cases, the return on investment questions are important. They're going to be there. But if you don't get that core question right about what, how is this going to help underscore and emphasize and celebrate the identity of the people in this space, then you're not going to get fast adoption of these kinds of communities that you may be seeking to build.
So Todd, as you kind of elaborated on, there's many aspects, right, and many dimensions of impact, if I can kind of say it that way. Can you paint a broad stroke of a leadership team says, we're willing to go through the journey. We understand the benefits, exactly like you're saying. What would our journey look like? What can we anticipate, for lack of any other words, as you kind of work with us to move us forward, if you will?
Sure. So I think one of the things that I work through with organizations is understanding from the perspective of that leadership team, and then from their customers, what their expectations are about this space. So part of a regular engagement that I would have with any kind of team is whether you term it a workshop, a brainstorming session, a requirements gathering session, doesn't matter what you call it, but coming together to unpack what the group feels this community is going to be about and why they want to create it. That's important. We've got to capture that. We've got to crystallize that into a vision statement. In fact, a tool that I've often used is there's an open source tool called the Community Canvas, which is free and open to use, communitycanvas.org, that basically gives you a canvas style layout, like you've heard of business plan canvases, and there's a variety of others that are there. This basically asks you a lot of the core questions about, okay, what is the purpose of this community? Who's it for? How are you going to track success? What will people do in this community, or throughout their journey, within the space? Defining those questions, getting that internal team to vocalize that and capture it, so you can play it back to them, and so that you can ensure that there's a level of consensus is critically important. Seeing around that corner, that set of corners first is essential to success, because in those cases where I haven't gotten a leadership team to get together and say, okay, we're going to pull together all of our stakeholders and meet on this important topic, it has 100% of the time fallen flat. It simply doesn't work if they don't work through to define what the vision of that is. If they want to hand it to you, I'm immediately suspicious of how much work they actually did on it. And then the other critical piece of that is to reality test it with customers, to say, hey, we're thinking of building this sort of community. Talk to 10, 15, 25 of your customers to see if what the company thinks, what the leadership team thinks is important, is actually what the members or your constituents, your stakeholders, your customers think is important. And there's usually a disconnect between the two. And then it's my job as a strategist to try to harmonize those interests, because it's never totally about what the company wants, and it's never totally about what the customers want. It's a little bit of each, and ensuring that there's an overlap of interests that are there. And so working through that piece can often be a 2 to 3 month process to understand that, selecting a platform, going through the process of making sure that platform, the technology, the container, meets the needs of the use cases and the desires of that community, and then going through the launch and initial rollout of that community platform. Then seeing around the corners of the pitfalls there is a lot of the work that I end up doing. Like not opting for like the big honking launch, but having sort of a small launch, and then progressively, again, that emergent design approach, progressively larger audiences that you introduce to the space, so that you're not introducing people to a ghost town, so that there are conversations, that there is life within the space. It's a lot like trying to start a fire from kindling. If you don't have a match and you're just trying to create friction, that's, getting that moment of organic fire to actually occur takes some nurturing and patience to do, especially in the early days of the community.
Yes. Thanks, Todd, for sharing that. And I have a quick comment here, Sai and Todd. What Todd has been explaining about communities, similar to what we do in product discovery or product delivery. We call it as a value stream mapping, where we wanted to solve a problem or re-establish, is this the true problem that we want to solve? And in that process, we invent the true problem that is beneath of the problem what we are trying to solve. So like we talked about in many ways, your work is overlap with the organization transformation that Sai and I does. So I can see a lot of parallels here. So that was a quick comment that I want to share before you go ahead with any other questions. Sai, please go ahead.
Appreciate it, definitely. Todd, I'd love for you to kind of look into the future, man. Look into the future. What do you see kind of relative to digital strategy, online communities, and digital workplaces? Where are we going?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some interesting opportunities that are coming into play right now. Right now we're in the mad scramble where every community platform player out there is incorporating AI elements, to what they're doing. For better or for worse, they're going to be there. Some of them are not going to be great implementations. Others, will make sense and will grow over time. Just like it took us a long time to get social media right, and I still don't think we have. Like any tool, there's good and bad to it. I think where I'm excited and interested is, I think we're continuing to see technology get better and better at connecting people and getting rid of the social friction of the technology, like making the technology more invisible over time. And so I think that next layer of what we're going to see is moving beyond the flat screen video interactions that we have here, moving beyond text-based interactions. I think that we're going to be doing more to simulate an experience of spatial relationships in communities. And so I've been involved with, and I'm very interested in seeing the development of not metaverse, because that's too Zuckerberg adjacent, to think about, but more semi-immersive environments where I don't need to strap a brick to my face, but I can get into a browser and I have a representation of moving through a physical space, interact with others. I think gaming environments do this really well. They've created rich three-dimensional environments, and I think we still haven't found the killer app that does this well yet. I think there are some that are on their way, but I'm very interested in that, because I think then we will truly be thinking about community in terms of how we design architectural spaces for people to interact with each other. I'm a big fan. There's a book, or I guess a whole series of books that came out starting in the 90s called Not So Big House. And in that book, they talk about the idea of creating livable spaces for people to be in, and building principles into those spaces. Like, yes, there is a public meeting space or a crossroads or a place where you're bringing people together that is conducive to being a open public forum where happenstance meetings occur, because you want those things to happen, as well as alcoves, private spaces for people to retreat into and to deepen relationships with each other. I think when we've crossed that barrier from text-based interaction, which is rife with opportunities for misunderstanding, and crossed that barrier from video interactions like this, which are wonderful, but there's not a spatial relationship here. This is not a group that invites other people in. If we were doing this in a more truly immersive, virtualized environment, the people who are watching this stream may be gathered around, or maybe they've broken off for other conversations. We'd be able to see how directly interesting the stuff we're doing is to the rest of those groups. And I think that community online will eventually become those spaces first, and then text second within the space. And not that I'm going to necessarily have a game avatar. I don't want a robot body to see things, but I think our video-based avatars, even 3D versions of ourselves, will be appearing, in spaces that are photorealistic and ideally not distracting, around that. There are obviously issues, both ethical and technological, at play with that. So I don't think we're quite having these things happen yet, but it's what I'm keeping my eye on over the next 5 to 10 years.
Beautiful. It definitely will be an interesting road ahead, to say the least, if it hasn't already been interesting enough looking in the rearview mirror, quite honestly.
Well, Sai, Mudassir, really appreciate both of you and all the questions about this. This is obviously a topic dear to my heart, but I think one which, as we've said through the course of the conversation here, we have some very strong mutual interests in the work.
Definitely. So
Thanks. Yeah, I was saying thanks for unpacking the digital strategy and then community strategist work, and that is very insightful, and I hope our audience would have learned much more than what it is out there.
Well said. I'm sorry. Go on, Todd. Please forgive
me.
me.
No, I was just going to say thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I think that I think one of the reasons, just to leave people with something to think about here, one of the reasons that that organizations struggle with establishing community is that it tends to be such an assumed property of human interaction, human existence. Oh yeah, I know what community is. I've got my neighborhood community. I've got my church community, the people that I live and work with, and it's like the old adage that fish don't see water. It's one of those consulting old saws that makes me cringe a little bit. I suspect that part of the problem is that it is such an invisible thing, and like background radiation or something, that as soon as you sensitize people to the idea of like, oh, we want to foster a sense of community in our group, it raises the question of, well, how do we do that? How do we actually make that? And the hint that I have for anyone that catches us on the replay or who's in the session here live with us is that it's not going to be the answer is not on big social media platforms, which are large broadcast spaces. They're increasingly not about community. They're about transaction and visibility, but they're not necessarily, not to say that deep interaction can't happen there. It can, but again, it's like the big gambling casino where there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of bright lights, a lot of flashing lights, a lot of noise, and instead, I'm a bigger proponent for cozier, safe communities that are at their own space.
Very well said. Any other thoughts or comments, Todd, or anything that you'd like to leave our audience with, my friend?
Yeah, so I would like to share a link in the chat if it's possible with everyone. I just had a wonderful interview series that I did, a 5-part series on the role of the chief community officer in the enterprise. And I did this in conjunction with my colleague I mentioned earlier, Jay Washington of Birdie in the Hand Consulting. And she and I interviewed 5 chief community officers from a variety of different organizations because we think it's really important to raise the conversation of community, that idea of community building being a central consideration for leadership teams, and ensuring that someone is at the table. It doesn't necessarily need to be at parity with the C-suite, but somebody who is that voice, who is helping organizations to understand that more expansive role than simply push marketing or lead acquisition. That it is a little more full cycle. It's very related to customer success, customer retention, customer loyalty, and so those conversations are raising that as a question. So I thank you for giving me the chance to share that.
A pleasure, dear friend. A pleasure, and wonderful having you. And definitively, any closing thoughts yourself, Mudassir, before I add just a few things and we sign off?
So, based on what Todd has shared, more than a closing thought, this is a realization of what community managers or community strategists that they are doing is at a surface level to what Todd has been explaining is the realization that I am getting after this conversation, and there is much more to that as Todd explained. Thanks.
Excellent. And definitively, this is extremely, I'll say, core to the notion of community is identity. And identity, as Todd has been talking about, is an emergent property of individuals as well as collectives, and the notion of culture. And I absolutely love the conversation of where you took us, Todd, in particular, as the technology becomes more invisible and the more imbues in our lives, it becomes that much more experientially rich and immersive. And so I really look at the role that you serve in so many capacities, Todd, as really being that balance between the integration of the human element and the technological element. And that is a very, very crucial societal impact, more than just simply a business impact or otherwise. So truly grateful that you spent some time with us today.
Thank you, Sai. Thank you, Mudassir. So grateful for the conversation today and the exchange of ideas, and love the work that you're both doing with this series. Deconstructed is a wonderful theme for people to watch. I hope everybody follows and watches your stuff.
Likewise, man. Likewise. Definitively check Todd out. We'll definitely get that link out even further on YouTube that you shared. And by all means, thank you to the audience for joining us, and we look forward to future conversations. Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Mudassir.
Thank you.
Take care now.